So I've got this little Panasonic 80s boombox, which I've done a video on before. I'll include a link to it below. Dent in the grill here, but you know, works well. Quite good sounding cassette deck on this, but it's missing the battery door. And that's always been, you know, that's always irritated me. And something I always look for actually when I buy radios, and I forgot for this and didn't notice for some reason. So what I thought I'd have a do is have a go at trying to make it with this, with this plastic. This is heat bendable sheet ABS. Here's the sticker on it in case you want. I just ordered this from Amazon, I think. I've played with a little corner of it to try a couple of things. It's got a textured side and a shiny side, which you could glue. I did experiment with this a little bit with solvent gluing on it, and it worked, but it wasn't as strong as I'd hoped. To get solvent gluing to work, so you can glue two pieces of ABS together with acetone. The acetone dissolves the ABS and they stick together, and it would have worked fine for trim, but I'm not sure about whether it would work for anything structural. ABS glues quite well with super glue too, so that's always an option. But what I was hoping to do was cut a piece of this to fit in here as a replacement for the battery door. Not perfect, but you know, would do the job, keep the dust out, and possibly keep the batteries in. So what I did is I actually used the cutting mat for its intended purpose and made a bit of a form. So I'm going to try to cut this shape out roughly. This 16th of an inch stuff will cut with heavy scissors. So I was going to try to cut this out and then try to do a few heat bends on it. Now this one here is the hard one, which is to get a bend all the way across, and I have my doubts as to whether that's going to succeed with such a short piece. So what I'm probably going to do is cut a broad rectangle of it, not try to cut the top edge, not try to cut the bottom edge. Do this bend and then try to cut these tabs out of it. These tabs here are going to go down in here and hopefully will hook in, and you'll be able to unhook them with a screwdriver or something, I guess, to get it out. We'll figure that out when we get to it. These little tabs are going to come in here and hook into the original little slots. So they'll have a series of small bends in them. I'm fairly convinced that I can manage these small bends. They're not going to look good, but it doesn't have to. I just have to get a corner to stick into these. You can see them from the bottom, these little slots that hold the battery box in place. This center tab mainly keeps the D batteries in place, but also provides something for the edge of the battery box to rest on there. So that is not hold it shut, it's just here, and two little tabs down here. So I'm going to cut this out and see, and I will bring you along if there's anything interesting going on at that point. I've never tried this before. I've only played with this sort of plastic. Well, you can see the extent of my playing with it is this little corner. So this is all brand new to me. Whether it's successful or not, I do not know, but it seems worth a try. I'm not sure this is going to show, but I'll try. So what I did is I put my template on here and I transferred the overall outline, which is marked by that line scratched in, and that's my first bend line. So what I'll do is I'll cut out this outline and then work from there, and I'm just going to cut it out with scissors, I think. The only line that I'm concerned with being accurate is this one, because all the others are going to be cut. So this is the only one that has to be good, and the others can be approximate. So I made the first cut here with scissors, just using these that are on my desk here, and that went quite well, but there's no way I can easily cut this whole line with scissors. And I'm thinking of getting a carpet knife and seeing if I can cut through it like that. It's only 1/16 of an inch and it's ABS, so it's fairly soft. So I'm gonna try that. That was successful. I was able to cut it with this, but it's very hard to, because you needed to cut with a fair bit of the blade to get through it. It liked to wander off the straight edge, so it's not exactly straight, or good, but it'll do for this purpose, because the only edge I care about are these two ones, and I mean, it's nice at the bottom's reasonably square. So yeah, so the next step is going to be to try to manage this bend here. And for that, I'll have to get out the heat gun and get some stuff set up and probably get this camera a little bit farther away from the source of heat. So here's my setup for this part. I've clamped the short end in this vise thing. It's going to get dent with the textured side out, so that's there. And I'm going to bend it towards me here, and I'm going to heat right along the edge with the old cheapo Black & Decker heat gun. And it doesn't take a lot of heat to make this stuff flexible. Now, I don't want to bend it at a full 90 degrees. I want, I don't know, maybe 66 degrees, 65 degrees, something in that range, right? So, but I think once I've bent it part way, it's going to be fairly easy to adjust it. So let's see how it goes. I think it's going to be trial and error. The most important thing, though, is that this bend be perpendicular to these ends, right? Because those are the only ends I care about. This is all will be cut off later. So that's the important part of this. So I spent some time lining it up with my guideline on here. Again, exactly the positioning up and down doesn't matter, but it's angle with respect to the corners that matters. And I think I'm going to try to heat it evenly along the whole end and not try to heat one side first and move it all along, all in hopes of keeping that bend even. So I'm going to plug in the heat gun and I'm going to give this a try. I take that back. I've already plugged in the heat gun. So I will put this on low. My experience earlier on has suggested this bends quite quickly and easily. Well, apologies for the noise. And we want to put the minimum amount of heat we can in here to make it work. And some creaking. It's probably the plastic changing size as it warms up. And a little bit of starting to go. Okay, I'm going to stop there and see how I've done. So I didn't get a very tight bend. It's quite curved. And I don't think it's terribly... No. Well, let me try it and see how it works, and then we'll come back and reevaluate. And so here's where we want it to go. It's going to go in here. And actually, I think it's going to work. Needs to be a little more. I need to go down a little more, but I think that might work. See, so the idea was it would go up right here, but we need to go down just a few more degrees. And maybe I'm going to heat it from the other side this time, because I can see I bent it more in the center. I brought this along to help me out. Okay, let's let that cool down a little bit and see. So definitely you can get a tighter bend if you heat on the outside than on the inside. That makes sense. And having a straight edge of some sort to push down on it seems to help. Okay, looks pretty good. It's pretty close, right? If you see it against here, you can see it's pretty close to the angle. It's just about spot on, really. So that, I think, is as good as I'm going to get it. So the next step is going to be to try to make some guesses about where the cuts are going to go here and take it from there. So here I've marked the center of where the catches are going to be. So it's marked this, right? So what I want to do now is put this across, and then I will cut out, I'll do it this way. So I'm going to take my form on here and use that, and I've put these marks on as a kind of sanity check. Right, so I'll take this on here and then use that to cut these pieces out. I think I'm going to do that with a Dremel and a plastic cutting wheel. So here's the setup for this. We have the Dremel, and we've got the plastic here. So I'll cut along there, and I've made some marks with a paint pen, which marks nicely on the plastic. Since we're on this side and scratching it is not that helpful. And we'll see how this goes. I'm not sure how this is going to work. As always, doing something like this, use a vise or watch your fingers, because it's easy to go through onto the other side if you're not careful. So there's the first cut. I don't anticipate these on the ends being difficult. This is going to be a bit more of a pain. Good idea to have eye protection on when doing this. But yeah, I think this is going to work. I will be back once it's done. Okay, bits of plastic and smelling this around, but that appears to have worked reasonably well, and this would probably work to just deburr this edge a little bit. But this one is going to take some work, but that I think is going to be reasonably successful. Now, the question is whether I'm going to be able to bend these down. those now fit in there. Let's see how well we are doing in terms of lining up the bend, and we're doing very well. You can't see that, but it's really good. So the next step on this, let me remove this tape and I'll show you. So these are going to need to have almost 90-degree bends in, and here by accident I've gone in a little bit, and I think I'm going to do that deliberately on here so that I give them a little bit of relief. Then we'll try to bend these down. So just to show you what I mean. So cut it in here a little bit to provide a little bit of relief and make the bend go easier. Same with this one. And then we'll bend those down. Once those are bent down so that they will hook into the, we're really just going for kind of fiction fit in there. Once those are done, then I can start to consider where to cut along here. This is a surprisingly complex project. But as you can see, it's going to look pretty nice if I have to get it working. Okay, we'll be back in a minute. All right, well, let me show you where I am with this. So I did cut these tabs and I bent them. I will show you the technique for bending them with these ones, assuming that's successful. This really went very well and quite easily. But yeah, I worked out a way that works for those. So for this, I need to cut it off with a Dremel once again along here and cut these off. And now the length of these tabs here matter. These ones didn't really, because I'm intending them to just sort of friction fit in the top of the of the case, and maybe I'll put a little handle or something here to pull it out. These, on the other hand, are going to matter in terms of length, and I'm a little nervous about this. I'm tempted to cut it large and then cut it down, but that's going to be a real pain, and so I think I'm going to break down and trust my pattern, which has been fairly reliable so far, and cut it the size I've got marked here, and see how that goes. So I've marked it once again with the paint pen so that I've got a reference beyond just this. And I did make a couple of dots at the ends, holding it up to the case to try to use that as a bit of a sanity check for the pattern. But so far the pattern has been spot on. So I think I'm going to trust it. So I will get back to dremeling, make a huge mess around here once again, and then get back to you. Fortunately, it's a nice warm day here in Toronto, so I've got the window open for the smell of melted plastic. Much dremeling and vacuuming of little bits of plastic later, and this is what we've got. So it's a fairly good, fairly faithful copy of the original pattern I made. And these are going to be much too long, so we'll need to cut those off at some point. But the key question right now is to put the initial bend in them, which will be easier if they're longer. Also to clean this up any that we can. Like, for example, cleaning out these corners. And then make the initial bend here in these pieces. And I'm going to try not making the relief cut this time and see if it works without it. I will clean up the bends here. I don't think there's going to be too much of a problem if these stick out a little farther, because I think if anything I've cut this a little on the small side, but I'll only be able to see that by looking at the radio itself. But overall I'm pretty happy with this, and yeah, I think these came out quite a bit better than I was expecting. This one here is quite tall compared to this one, but oh well. So let me check that and then we'll see where we are. So what I've done is I've taped a straight edge along underneath to protect this edge from collapsing. And what I'm going to do is heat this one and then try to bend it the way I want with a screwdriver. And if necessary, I can use something else on the backing. But I don't think I will need to. And I found with these sides that this actually went very easily. I also used the straight edge along there. So let me get the heat gun and see how it goes. Okay, so the heat gun is on and I'm applying it as close as possible to the spot I want to work on, just until it starts to get bendy. Just a little more, okay. There we go. Then I'm going to use a screwdriver to try to make it do what I want it to do. So you can see that's almost, I'm going to do a little more. Heating right at the bottom here. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. It's pretty straight. I may want it more than straight, but let's start with that. Now I'll do the same thing on the other side here. So it starts to get floppy. There we go. Yeah, that one went quite smoothly. So there we go, 2 fairly tight bends in those. So I decided I wanted them a little tighter, so that one's like that. You can see if you compare the 2 of them, I'm going to make this one match that one. And you can see how easy it was to make these bends in these small pieces. Okay, so let's see where we are with this thing. It's covering, we can get it out. And it's got these pieces, but these pieces now stick inside to the battery bay. So what we want to do is fold them over to make them fit in these little slots here. And they may need to be cut down a bit, but you'll see everything else fits surprisingly well. It's not perfect. May need a little trimming in the corners here, but it's already sort of working. It'll already keep the dust out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a paint pen, I think, and just mark in here like that. I can take some alcohol, which is okay on ABS, and clean that up afterward. But you see that marks where the tabs have to be. So what I'll do then is bend this up so that's in line with these, and then cut it off with a Dremel. I'll probably do that off camera. I'm probably going to use a pair of pliers to make the bend. And then I can adjust this bend and that bend to make it line up properly. And then you'll be able to put it in and have it clip in to the bottom side here. Well, there's the result. There's my finished product. Well, it could be cleaned up a little bit, but that's it. There's the pattern. So as you can see, the pattern came in very useful, and the result looks very much like it. Here are the little tabs. I ended up putting a little notch in them to function as a sort of catch. That seemed to work. And I also had to adjust the angle of these a bit to make them work as well. But the whole thing actually works really well. It could be cleaned up a little bit around the edges, but I don't know if I've got the patience for that. Certainly not right now. Let me show you the battery box on the radio. Here's the back of the Boombox. And these little edges here go into the original catches down at the bottom, like this. Lines like that. And these slide into the original open and closing pulses and spring in quite stiffly. It's catching along here, which makes it a little bit awkward. If you want to get it off, you need a screwdriver to pop one of these open. That's something, the ability to open it without a tool is one of the things we've lost in this project. But as you can see from a distance, it would be fine. And it's certainly functional at keeping the batteries in, should I have batteries in it. And satisfies my need for completeness on the radio to have it, all the parts, after a fashion. So, overall thoughts at the end of this project. The first is, I'll do much better job the second time I try to do this. But it did go more or less as planned. And the trick was the pattern and thinking through the order of the bends. That was certainly crucial. But then it's weirdly less important than you think. Because one thing I discovered as I was trying to adjust these is it's quite easy to apply very limited amounts of heat to an area to even just this heat gun, even with this very simple heat gun, which has a fairly wide pattern, by letting this hang over the edge of a bench or my desk here, and then holding it up to the heat gun and pulling it off, you can get really quite good control about what you are and aren't heating. So I was able, let's see if I can get, oh there, I got it out. So I was able to adjust the angle of these quite closely, and I have a feeling that I'd be able to fix up something like this corner, which got a little overjuiced when I bent it in the first place. And the tools for controlling these small bends are really very simple. You can use your fingers if you've got enough calluses, I suppose. But I found a crescent wrench worked nicely to hold these straight when bending them, and just a flathead screwdriver to hold them in place worked adequately. For the longer ones, the scraper worked nicely, or you know, whatever you've got. Certainly something like a straight edge is very helpful. So I hope that gives other people an idea for a project if they've got a radio that's missing a battery case. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. I guess the other question I would have is, could you 3D print something like this out of ABS plastic? In which case you'd have to deal with the same smell that I did when I dremeled all the bits and pieces off of here. I don't do that myself. I've never done any sort of 3D printing, so I don't know, but this is a pretty simple shape, right? And you could actually do these catches properly, and possibly even these catches properly, fairly simply, I think. But the basic shape of it would be no problem to model, I think. The question is whether ABS plastic would be strong enough, and I bet it would be. So I'd be curious as to whether anyone has 3D printed, well, I guess you might connect it by USB, but 3D printed a battery cover for an old radio. It seems like a fairly natural use of the technology. But again, I think you'd have to print it in ABS. There's actually a surprising amount of bending and pushing force. That's why I didn't try to glue any of these tabs on, because I didn't think they'd survive. These might, because the force is down on them. So if you bent this out and then glued a little nub on to go into there, I think that would probably work. And that was one of my possible ways of doing this. But, you know, this is a pretty big, pretty thin thing. And keep in mind that this sort of sheet plastic costs you, you know, $10 a sheet or something like that. And so the cost of this is pretty minimal. Anyhow, that's the end of this project. Thanks very much.